Ambassador Kauzlarich, in recent months, the campaign targeting the civil society and human rights activists in Azerbaijan has intensified. Among the arrested are the prominent human rights activists, Leyla and Arif Yunus, and a whole bunch of others. What is your assessment of the situation that's taking place in Azerbaijan? Are you concerned about what's going on there?
Yeah, concern is a word that gets overused in situations like this. I think we're beyond concerned in terms of how to view the situation there. This is a development that in my following Azerbaijan since 1992, I have never seen this degree of both internal oppression, arrests, suppression of the media and free speech. I've just never seen anything like it. And I think it's something that those of us who have a deep sense of respect and affection for the people of Azerbaijan look upon with more than concern. I am worried about the direction that Azerbaijan is taking, both in terms of how it deals with its own people, but how it deals with the rest of the world and the United States in particular. So we're beyond the point where we simply express concern. We really have to call things as they are in Azerbaijan. And what's going on there is just unacceptable behavior for a country that desires a strategic relationship with the United States and claims that it's part of the Euro-Atlantic area.
Ambassador Kauzlarich, one of the most recent disturbing developments in Azerbaijan has been the denial of exit to Said Nuri, who is a U.S. citizen of Azerbaijani origins. Now, to my knowledge, this is the first time the Azerbaijani government has taken the liberty to detain, essentially detain, an American citizen. What do you make of this situation?
Well, it's just part of that general trend that I alluded to in my first answer. I think people are doing things without even considering the implications of their acts. This denial of Said Nuri's wish to leave Azerbaijan after visiting his sick father took place the same day that Ilham Aliyev was meeting Secretary of State Kerry in Wales at the NATO summit. That is not a friendly act to take an American citizen, and I don't care what his origin was, he is an American citizen now, and tell him you cannot leave Azerbaijan. That is just behavior that's unacceptable from a government that claims that it wants a strategic relationship with the United States and whose president is meeting with the U.S. Secretary of State the very day that this takes place. I can't explain it. I have no insights as to what is motivating this behavior. I can only say as an American citizen, this is not acceptable. I would have real concerns going to Azerbaijan today because I would not believe that I would be protected against the same kind of behavior that my fellow American citizen is subject to.
The New York Times has recently published an infograph/article about the Azerbaijani attempts to buy influence here in the United States. According to the report, the ambassador, Ilham Aliyev, has signed contracts with two high-end lobbying firms here in Washington, D.C. to represent Azerbaijan, to launch a PR campaign and also to develop media contacts. What is your assessment of the Azerbaijan's lobbying efforts here in the United States? Are they likely to succeed?
Well, I'm not clear what the objective is. Sometimes it seems like the objective is to influence public opinion in Azerbaijan more than public opinion in the United States. I have no criticism of any government wishing to tell its story in the United States, in newspapers and through panel discussions and public events. I think that's perfectly legitimate behavior. Countries can employ lobbyists as long as that relationship is disclosed. I see no problem with that. Many countries, including countries we would regard as close allies of the United States, employ lobbyists to help advance their cause on issues of interest to their governments. But I think when you start getting into a situation where you're trying to influence political attitudes in the United States, the way that some of these efforts seem to be directed in the case of Azerbaijan, that kind of crosses a line between legitimate public diplomacy and trying to influence the U.S. Political system. I'm not familiar with the details other than what I've read in the New York Times, but I think that if an individual or an entity is going to receive money from the government of Azerbaijan to do certain things, to write articles or to conduct seminars, they ought to disclose that the sponsor of this event is the government of Azerbaijan. I have a fairly low standard there, because if they do that, then fine, do whatever you want, but don't hide the fact that this is being sponsored. I think that's not the appropriate way to behave. Just in terms of judgment of the impact, I would say the impact, except for individual congressmen who will say the right thing about the importance of Azerbaijan, or individual business people doing that, there really isn't any impact with the public at large. It's too bad. I think Azerbaijan could have a good story to tell, but they tend to focus on issues that really don't resonate with the American people.
In his recent speech, the head of the presidential administration in Azerbaijan, Ramiz Mehdiyev, quoted almost verbatim an article published in Roll Call by an individual named Mayan Jaffe. And in this article, Mr. Mehdiyev mentioned how the author had called on the U.S. government to essentially stop funding the foreign broadcasters, including RFERL and Voice of America. Do you see any link between the lobbying efforts here in the United States and the Azerbaijani government's campaign to silence essentially the independent media inside Azerbaijan?
Well, let me just say, as an American taxpayer and someone who's had years of experience with both VOA and RFERL, I think there's no money better spent in terms of not only getting the message about the United States, but also the message about what's going on in the rest of the world to countries who otherwise wouldn't be able to hear that. So I'm not only a fan, but a great supporter of the work that you and your sister organizations do. That said, this is an example of the problem that I was talking about earlier. I don't know Ms. Jaffe. It's the first time I've seen her name. She's not someone who I'm aware is an independent writer on Azerbaijan or the Caucasus. So to be able to reflect the degree of detail, setting aside the question of should RFERL and VOA be funded, strikes me as unusual. One has the impression, especially the way Ramiz Mehdiyev played back almost word for word, citing her as a well-known publicist in the United States, strikes me that that's an example of a message that Azerbaijan wanted delivered in the United States for the audience back at home. And that goes directly to the heart of suppressing not only the internal voice, but the external voice that doesn't necessarily present the information as Azerbaijan would want it presented. What Mr. Mehdiyev was saying was, look, even Americans criticize RFERL and VOA. Therefore, the subliminal message was, it's okay for us to criticize and maybe suppress those two organizations. So I think there's a direct connection between that article and what Mehdiyev said.
What do you believe may be the long-term implications of what's transpiring in Azerbaijan with regard to human rights for the future of US-Azerbaijan relations?
You know, I've said elsewhere that to have a strategic relationship with a country, the United States must be sure that that relationship is based not simply on questions of security or politics, but on shared values. Obviously, security and political relations are important, but if you don't have shared values, it's hard to have a strategic relationship. Now, what unfortunately Azerbaijan has been demonstrating, especially in the last year, is a set of values which simply are incompatible with a strategic relationship with the United States. The problems with democracy are long-standing. But when you start detaining American citizens and saying they cannot leave the country, then I think you're really taking a position that totally undermines any basis for a strategic relationship. I see no signs that this is changing. It seems that the oppression is going to continue, that there will be even more arrests and detentions. And the government is displaying an attitude which, to people who are not informed, find it very hard to believe that they really are serious about having a strategic relationship with the United States. You know, I think this is, we're in an extraordinarily difficult period because of developments in Ukraine and elsewhere. You know, the focus is back on the former Soviet space. But Azerbaijan is not positioning itself well with the United States to be able to have the kind of relationship that Azerbaijan in fact needs, I think, going ahead as Russia becomes even more of an unpredictable actor.
Thank you, Ambassador Kauzlarich.
Thank you.